Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Coaches Networking meeting. This meeting will feature speakers John Chamberlain, Amy Bonaduce, and Jenny Hanna. As always, the meeting will be hosted by board member Thomas Brookman, and I'm Monica Lee, a member of USTA's Media and Technology Department. Before we begin, I'm just going to take you through a few rules of engagement for today's meeting. So firstly, this meeting is being recorded and will be made available for you to review later on. Second, please stay on mute for the duration of the meeting unless invited to unmute yourself and to speak. And if you have any questions, you may enter them into the chat box. You can submit your questions at any time and we will get to them when the presenters are ready for questions. And at this time, I will hand things off to Thomas Brookman to begin today's meeting.
Thanks a lot, Monica. Welcome, everybody. We're awful glad you're here. And it seems like it's been a long time since December. We sort of missed our, we deliberately missed the meeting in January, but it seems like it's been a long time. We'd especially like to welcome everybody who's here, new or very experienced. We're so glad that you made it and joined us tonight. I think we have a very nice program tonight as well. So we're going to begin with John Chamberlain, who's a board member and a longtime baton expert. He is a champion athlete. He's a coach of champions. He's a master judge. And really all you need to know about John is to watch him working with children or athletes and the magic that he has and the fun that he has playing with them and teaching them at the same time. And John is here tonight to talk with us and share with us about the Creative Challenge Award. So John, take it over, please.
Well, good evening, everyone. And I come to you from wonderful, warm Florida at 85 degrees today. So all of you that are in the frozen north, I'm sorry. And now home of the home state of the 2021 Super Bowl champions. Go Bucks. So thanks New England for Tom and Gronk. Anyway, yes, the Creative Challenge. This is our coming up on our fourth year, though we kind of had a COVID year that kind of got skipped a little bit. But the Creative Challenge was something I dreamed up once because we were trying to do different initiatives on the board. I thought, wouldn't it be kind of fun to do a little kickstart program for our coaches and professionals in the sport? And so USTA, fortunately, is in a financial situation where we are able to financially hopefully give back to some of our coaches. And I know even a few of the people that are on here tonight have been recipients of that. So, but we are getting ready to relaunch our Creative Challenge. The only difference really is we currently are calling it the Creative Challenge Grant Program. So you're basically up for a $5,000 grant. And this $5,000 grant could be awarded to one person. It might be divided between two or three, depending on the applications that we receive. And there is going to be some information coming out very soon from our PR departments on the Creative Challenge. But I'm going to share if I can, if it works. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if it'll share or not, Monica. You can see if I'm doing this right. Probably not. Anyway, I'm not going to spend too much time doing it but the program, like I said, it's really geared towards hopefully our coaches or professionals and to dream up something big. You know, maybe you've had an idea that you wanted to do, but are just a little cash shy of getting it kick start and going. And that's what this whole program is about. There are some guidelines on what we expect you to submit as a proposal. And a little bit of follow-up that I like to do with you afterwards to see how successful it really was. Part of the gear too is that it was originally designed for our professional members only, though we've opened it kind of to a broader professionals in twirling in general this last year. But ideally, we would obviously like to hopefully that it's a program that does gear to maybe increasing participation in our sport. Increases hopefully revenue for you, possibly increased membership for USTA, and to our competition directors, eventually maybe to competitions or festivals and other opportunities. But it's been a broad range. We've had folks who have maybe approached in maybe some underprivileged neighborhoods or help to boost some programs in inner city programs. We've had some that have dealt with some disabilities and situations like that. We're right now, this last year, we awarded them programs like, we have 2 young, very professional in both their field of psychology and are working on some different programs, hopefully that support us in understanding better some of the diversities in twirling and things like that. So we've granted money towards those kind of programs. So it's a very wide range. But the whole idea really is we may not be able to pay for your entire project idea, but maybe enough to at least get you kick-started. And so that's kind of where it gears from. We don't expect any money back. It's pretty much a free grant, other than that, we will follow up to make sure you use the money properly and follow the expenses of it. If you say you ended up having to buy costumes or batons or tennis shoes or music and things like that, we do require the receipts to just have for the integrity of the money that was provided and spent. Just like any grant would do, they do expect some follow-up and some accountability. But the fun thing is, we're hoping just to put people's creative minds together and come up with some program out there that might help you. And maybe, especially coming off of COVID now and the pandemic and everybody kind of been claustrophobic and locked up, it's going to be a great time, hopefully by this fall, that you can really maybe use this kind of financial support to help advertise or kick off a program within your town, within your studios or whatever. So I think, be creative in your thought process. It's not restrictive in any way of that, other than it does have to be used towards something that goes to promoting the sport of baton. So those are some of the things. But we will be posting, there's a kind of cover sheet, and then there's a guideline on how to write your proposal and when to submit it. The deadline this year that we've set is June 1st. So you have to have your proposal for this grant submitted to me by June 1st. And then the board of directors will get a copy of all the proposals. We get a chance to read them, review them. And typically at one of the next upcoming board meeting, which will hopefully be around national time, we would go over and pick and select the recipients of this grant money for 2021. That will they should have the funds no later than September 1, so that they have in time for their fall programs. So hopefully you will put your creative minds together, take advantage of this great opportunity. You can get anywhere from $500 up to $5,000, depending how great you write and what kind of wonderful program you put together. But we're just here to hopefully, as USTA, we treasure our coaches and our professionals so much that we really have been excited to be able to put this kind of a financial investment back into you. So if you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat room or raise your hand and I'll try to answer if there's any quick questions. But otherwise, I would just put your mind to it and look for the forms coming out on it and some promotion coming out on it. And if you have any questions, though, you can always email me. My contact information is on USDA's website, so feel free to reach out. Tom, anything else?
Does anybody have any questions for John?
It's great to see all your wonderful faces.
This is not exactly a question, but I believe that one of the recipients is here tonight. Elaine Jones, I think, was a recipient of the Creative Challenge Award and worked with low-income youth and helped provide equipment. We've also had, as John mentioned, a person who had sort of a special ed orientation and was working with some disabled children, providing baton classes for them. And then more recently, I don't remember everything about this one, but this was one that involved literacy activities along with baton twirling in a club format. So there are a lot of opportunities for creative thought, and hope that you'll take up the opportunity to write for a grant that could significantly help. Let's see, let me check.
Exactly.
Amy Bonaduce, are you here yet?
I'm here.
Oh, yay. I'm so glad you're here. Want to thank John for your presentation and for being willing to answer questions. And there may be a few other questions that come up, John, and will be in the chat room. So
I'll keep
appreciate
an eye
you
out.
being here to answer. Amy Bonaduce is a former twirler. She works with Body Dynamics, has her own Body Dynamics studio. She's a dance and baton teacher. She's quite a choreographer. She's won the choreography award at USTA Nationals twice in the years that it has been awarded. And she's here this evening to talk with us about flexibility. We all know about its importance, but to give us some idea about some of the things that she does with flexibility, as well as some incentives that she uses. So Amy, take over, please. And if you need anything, just let us know.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me here, everyone. I'm going to pull up something, and you'll have to forgive me for being slow with this because I'm used to sharing my music with all my classes, but not necessarily slides. So let's see. There we go. So I think we should all see this. So Tom asked me to talk about flexibility, and there is a plethora of information about flexibility and what it means and how to be flexible or how to increase your stretching. And I am going to kind of limit it to my own education and experience, as well as in a way that I think is most applicable to you as a baton coach. So for me, flexibility is range of motion that's at a joint, as opposed to simply the flexibility of the connective tissue or the muscles or the other surrounding tissue around the joint. So when later on, when we're looking at some pictures that I have, it's going to be more about how their joints are able to mobilize to create certain movements like the splits. There is stretching that's done for different purposes. If you're doing it prior to exercise, whether it's baton class, a dance class, going for a run, anything that's done prior to it is mostly part of a warm-up, and it's mostly toward injury prevention, but it's not necessarily going to help you develop your flexibility. If you are, for example, in a ballet class, typically you'll have a bar that's 20 minutes or longer. And then there's a break before you go into center. And during that break, that's usually a place where dancers will work on their flexibility because their bodies are already warmed up. And once a tissue is at that higher temperature, there's more pliability and that there's more to be gained from the movement at that, or the stretching at that point in time. And oftentimes the stretching there is a little bit more specific to whatever parts of the body that you want to develop the flexibility for. And in our case, in baton twirling, flexibility, in my opinion, is important because it's necessary for correct technical execution of a lot of our movements, such as the grand jetés, illusions, cartwheels, walkovers, and more. If you can do the splits, that's usually a pretty good indication that your execution of your illusions, grand jetés, cartwheels, and walkovers are going to be decent, not great, but that level of flexibility is usually one of the things that's necessary for correct technical execution. For the National Academy of Sports Medicine, they have 4 types of stretching that they advocate. There's a lot more out there. These are the 4, again, that the NSAM advocates. The first one is self-myofascial rolling. And if you're not familiar with that, I encourage you to Google it or find somebody that can teach you something about it. That is something that I use for recovery. It's for corrective purposes, but I also, if I have run out of all my tricks in terms of developing flexibility in someone, I usually go for some kind of myofascial rolling or with pink balls to help them get over whatever it is that's holding them back. Static stretching, which is where you hold a stretch for at least 10 seconds, generally it's more around 30 seconds or more, is where I start with teaching kids how to stretch. They can start to learn the positions that they're supposed to be in, the correct technique, how to do that. They'll continue on with it as they develop and get more experienced, but that's where we start. Active stretching is not something that I personally use. And again, if you aren't familiar with it, I would encourage you to get familiar with it. If you want to go this route, it uses a concept called reciprocal inhibition, where you contract a muscle on one side of a joint, which has the effect of helping the muscle on the opposite side of the joint release. Again, it's not something that I specifically use for stretching, but a lot of people find it helpful. Dynamic stretching is something that I use to help kids stretch for longer, or kids or adults or people with more experience. It's usually a little bit more fun. It helps them stay more engaged with their stretching because it involves movement. So you're moving through a full range of motion. It's also an opportunity for you to work on things like their carriage or how they're using their arms while they're simultaneously in a stretch. And I will show you some of these things later on that I do with my kiddos. It's also important that when you're stretching that you don't overstretch. If you overstretch a muscle, you run the risk of taking it out of its ability to contract. Some theories of stretching also talk about that it creates micro tears in the muscle tissue. So if you're creating micro tears on a daily basis, hopefully there's some recovery time. But if you're stretching beyond a certain point and you're doing more than a micro tear, you might actually be causing some sort of injury to the muscle. Furthermore, if you have somebody that's hypermobile, that may be beautiful aesthetically, but it also opens them up to injury at a joint, injury in their spine, or some sort of soft tissue when they soft tissue injury if they're taking their range of motion beyond what is functional. So what I generally tell my kiddos is to stretch, and so it's uncomfortable but not painful. So to get kids to stretch, Shannon and I both, the splits are necessary for them to do an illusion full out. And so they're taught how to walk an illusion. And again, later on, I can show you what I mean by walk an illusion, but they're not allowed to do one full out in either practice or on competition until they can do the splits. And then they have to maintain the ability to do the splits. A couple years ago, I had two classes. One class was more of a grade school age group, and the second class was more middle school, and those classes were overlapped. And during that overlap time is when we stretched as a group. They all came into the studio. We're all in a big circle. And at some point in time, one of the kids started calling it torture time. And it was a joke, but they actually really liked it. And it was an opportunity for me to teach the younger kids how to stretch. I use the older kids as an example of what it's supposed to look like while I went around to each one of them. This is obviously pre-COVID. And they got to talk, they got to moan and groan, but they liked the camaraderie of being together. And even though we don't have those overlaps, they now request to have torture time. They like it. Stretching also is another opportunity for goals. So if you're working on goal setting with your kids, you can do something with regards to their flexibility. Right now, my kids have a goal for spring break. Most of them are close to the splits on at least one leg. So their spring break goal is to get the splits on that one. And then they have a long-term goal, and some of them, the long-term goal varies depending on how close they are to their splits. We also oftentimes have music. We include the movement. Again, that's part of the dynamic stretching. We talk to the kids. We have conversations about whatever, and it keeps them engaged in stretching while they're also not really thinking about it. So when COVID started, a friend of mine at a different studio, he started a banana split club. And when I started researching it, it's not a new thing. It's not a novel thing, but it was new to me. And so I borrowed his idea. on Zoom, I put together a graphic on Canva and then put it on there to here, kind of like I am with this. So they got to see this whole banana split club plan. So if they could do the splits on one leg, then they had to take their picture and they had to submit the picture either to myself or to Shannon, and then they would get a banana on the banana split board. My friend at his studio, he had them post their picture on their social media. We just had them submit it to us. They have 2 bananas. They get 2 bananas on the board, plus they get a $5 credit towards apparel. So it could be a baton, it could be their tights, it could be anything. And then with their 3rd banana, they get a $5 gift certificate for ice cream. My friend at his studio, he did a banana split party. But again, it's with COVID, that wasn't really an option. Plus, we weren't really keen on the idea of kind of isolating just the kids that got 3 bananas away from those that were still working on it. This is our banana split club chart. And it's in the office, it's by the water fountain, and it gets a lot of conversation. The kids look at it a lot, and it seems to be helpful in getting them to stretch. We actually have a lot more kids that can do the splits than what's on this board, but they haven't submitted their pictures yet. So with this here, this picture, the one on the right, I gotta move my little boxes here. So over here, when we talk about flexibility and flexibility added joint, you can look at kind of where her leotard line is, that's where the bulk of her mobility is coming from in order for her to do this cambray forward. As opposed to this child over here, she still has some bend at the hip joint, but the bulk of her mobility is right now coming from her back. And so in terms of flexibility, obviously this one is more flexible than this one, but specifically, the one on the right has more range of motion at her hip, whereas this one is, she was to go further, she would get it from her lumbar spine, which short term is fine, long term that potentially causes an issue for her. Here's some more, and it's the same idea. This one on the right, she has a lot more mobility at the hip, whereas this one over here has most of her mobility. Well, actually, she doesn't really have a lot of mobility. She technically can't even sit upright on her pelvis when she's sitting, say, in a chair. She can do the splits, however, but she gets a lot of her mobility from her back. And this is just a good example of not having that range of motion at the hip. Here's a couple splits. This one, it's the same kid in both pictures. This one up top, she can do the splits fairly decently, but she's actually getting her range of motion right at the top of her pelvis, kind of lumbar area, and she has a pretty big twist. And then for this picture, I even had to work hard to get her to square her shoulders up because she was so twisted around, even though she was flat in the splits. With this one here, I tried to get her to turn her belly button so it was looking towards her front leg. Her back hip can still be open, but more the belly button center line of her body needs to look more forward so she has this alignment, the proper alignment for her upper body connected into her lower body. She had the option with her back leg of having it parallel like it is or turning it out. Usually it's easier if the back leg is turned out. However, for her, this was the closest she could get into her splits and have her belly squared. So she still has some work to go in terms of actually, well, earning her banana on the banana split board. This child up here, she's a fairly new dancer. She just came to be fairly flexible, but this is a good example of a decent split. She's completely down, her belly button's aimed forward, her back hip can be open, her back leg's not really turned out, but she's still got the mobility to be able to do the splits. So she would be, once she has some other skills under her belt, she would have a really nice walkover, she would have a really nice grand jeté, a split leap. Her side leaps are probably going to be pretty decent as well. This child down here at the bottom, he really wants to do the middle splits. He's not quite in the middle splits because of his pelvis being more behind his feet. He also has the option of being more turned in or parallel, which is what I call the gymnastics version. I prefer that it's turned out so his kneecap, top of his foot, is looking more to the ceiling, but he would be even further away from a full split at this point in time if he were to do that. This is more of a necessary line for a cartwheel. So in the middle of a cartwheel, the more you have that center split, the nicer, more aesthetically pleasing that cartwheel is. In addition, if you're going to do a side leap, this split is pretty important. So with walkovers, not only is the leg part of it important, but I didn't have time to take pictures of this one, but there's also a huge component with your shoulder girdle and your pelvic girdle. So all your range of motion isn't being concentrated at the spine, and more specifically at the lumbar spine. So a lot of attention needs to be paid to the pelvic girdle. If they can do the splits, then that's pretty much what the front legs are doing, more or less, in a bridge. And a bridge is, again, a component of a walkover. The shoulder girdle mobility is something that they typically teach in gymnastics. It's in dance. It's oftentimes a lot ignored. But I'm going to take this off of here and show you on myself what I mean with regards to shoulder girdle mobility. So first of all, you have your scapula in the back. There's this little tip of the shoulder blade. And on this guy, the scapula is on the back side of his rib cage, which means that he doesn't have a lot of option for range of motion unless he disconnects his arm or he pulls this even further back behind him and then compresses the thoracic spine. The other option is if this guy can come more out to the side of the rib cage, then the scapula can follow the arm, and there's a lot more range of motion offered in the shoulder girdle because the rib cage is out of the way. So on myself, I've got the tip of my scapula here, and the more that the tip of my scapula can rotate underneath into my armpit, the more that I can start to get my shoulder girdle mobility without actually having to be very flexible because I put my joints in such a position that they're already open. So to teach that, that can be a little bit tricky. I'm gonna switch my cameras. So this is my home studio. Let me flip it down a little bit. Once they can understand this idea that the scapula can come around to the front, and young kids, by the way, understand this a lot better than you think, and often a lot better than adults. I will have them on all fours, and so it's a wide stance, and they're basically shifting backwards, so their tails reaching towards the wall behind them. At the same time, their back body, I talk about their t-shirt tag area, which is really C7, that has to stay elevated towards the ceiling as the tip of the scapula and the armpit drop towards the floor. And the more they can get that drop towards the floor, the more that they can find that shoulder girdle mobility without compressing the thoracic spine. So this here, one, it feels great. If you would like to join me in this, you are more than welcome to try it. But again, the t-shirt tag area stays up as the tip of my scapula and my armpit press towards the front side of my rib cage. And it's literally trying to lever towards the front side of me. If I don't do that and I drop, you'll see that my shoulders are now in my ears. I'm compressing my neck, compressing my shoulders. There's a lot of nerves that are being pinched. So this generally is a safer way to get that shoulder girdle mobility. There's other variations of that stretch that you can do. You can be creative. You can use a bar. You can use a wall. I also have them do the stretch, and so their elbows are coming together, and they push their elbows forward and then scoop them in an upward direction, which again tractions the shoulder girdle more around to the front, just to get them the sense of how their shoulder girdle can mobilize in that direction. And then once again, once they find this, and sometimes this in and of itself is a hard position, it also again sets them up for being able to do this sort of position. In gymnastics, there's a lot of shoulder girdle exercises that they do that basically gear the same thing. So a lot of times they'll do a bridge. I'm not going to show you my bridge. It's not pretty, but they want to get the armpit over the hand, and they'll oftentimes traction this part of the scapula in a towards the front rib cage direction so they can get the armpit to stack over the hand. And so once you have that combined mobility of the shoulder girdle, the pelvic girdle, and then some basic arching of the spine, then you can get a pretty clean back bend bridge, put that together with your split, and you've got a walkover. So a few things that I do with my young kids to stretch, and young kids being probably 5 and up, the approach is different, or my delivery, I should say, is different, but it's really the same concept. I have them glue their belly to their thighs, and then it's actually easier on carpet. They're going to wiggle their tush, which is really your sit bones, back away from their feet, and they're trying not to move their feet. Usually I have them go the first time where their belly does unglue so they can get the mobility of their sit bones being able to walk back away from their hip bones, or excuse me, away from their hamstrings, which gives you this deep crease at the front. And then we just start over. And then the second time, I usually have them keep their belly glued to their thighs, walk their tush back so they're pulling their sit bone away from their hamstring, and they're gonna see how far they can go and keep their belly glued. And then we usually talk about how miserable we are or what our favorite flavor ice cream is or whatever. And then we unglue. From here, again, more joint mobilization is to be able to bend the knee without sliding the heel. And so however much you can bend the knee without sliding, your foot will probably flex, creates more of a hinge at the hip and the knee and the ankle. You can do both legs at the same time. You can alternate. We also do the similar thing with the elbow, trying to bend the elbow down towards the knee. It also rocks the upper body side to side. So for me, it's another back stretch. It also helps lever that shoulder blade around to the front some more. And then of course you can put all those things together. And really this is just a pike stretch. So lots of variation with that. In a straddle stretch, you can do the same thing with that mobilization where you bend the knee, flex the foot, but don't slide the foot. And again, the more that you can bend the knee without sliding, it creates more of a hinge at all 3 joints. This is another place where, depending on the age group, we'll do things like develop their arm movement, we'll pull it around, we'll add arm and leg, so they start to develop their port de bras, coordination of movement. We also do, I just call this rainbow. And so it's a standard side stretch, but I just keep it moving and we emphasize up and then over, up and then over. And I usually use music, and it's different music. And so there will be a different quality of it. Sometimes we swoop our arms out and around so they get a little bit of the suspension and then hang, suspension and then hang. Another version that we've done, we decided to name this going under the sun. And so we go out and around. And when we go forward, we're trying not to burn our head on the sun. We have a lot of don't burn your somethings in class. And so they're just being more swoopy. It gets them into more of that forward hinge, the forward stretch. This is, again, we'll rock side to side. We'll try to get the armpits down, but it's just the center stretch that most people do, but I've added some movement to it. And then we can get there and again, have a conversation. So those are just a few things that I do with my kiddos. And I don't know, does anybody have any questions? All right, well, I should probably get going because I have kiddos waiting for me.
Amy, phenomenal presentation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Well, obviously, we could spend a little bit more time on that, I reckon. There's a lot of knowledge there, and I hope that it had some worth for you as well. So without further ado, it's a real pleasure to move on to Hanna, who's going to also talk about some fundamentals, but Jenny's presentation is more oriented towards baton and baton handling and baton twirling. And she's going to go over some of the fundamentals that she teaches her students. And so Jenny, if you're ready, thank you very much. It's yours.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Jackie asked me to focus on like what I would do if I was just starting out a beginner class. So I'm going to share my screen. I made a handout and then I'll go through it with you. But let me go back to the top. Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry. Okay, well, I'm a list maker, so I tried to make a list of basic techniques, to do when you're first starting out with the class. And as I started thinking about, because, well, I haven't been doing it during COVID, I've mainly been teaching Zoom, but when I have a group, and I used to teach like 30-minute technique classes. So the first thing, though, that I find really helps people, and I'll stand up and do this stuff in a little bit, but if you can help them have a feeling of accomplishment. So I try to sprinkle in some things that are a little bit easier, so they can have fun and say, wow, that worked, and see themselves catch it. And then with that, then I'll stick in the harder stuff that may take us a few months to get. So I've found, for me personally, that's how I work, because I don't get things the first time, and I work and I work and I work. And I've found that sometimes if you're about to get frustrated, if you move on, then 9 times out of 10, it'll be better. And that I found happens with the little ones, like all of a sudden their flourish or something will start to work. And then in a minute, I'll show you the series that I teach as I work towards a thumb flip and making sure it goes over their thumb. And then I love to teach rolls. So I'll show you the order that I usually teach them in. And one thing I was thinking about is when I had been asked to think about this, years ago, I started teaching with a group, and I came in there were younger ones and there were older ones, and the older girls had maybe not, their experience with rolls had not been as positive, and they didn't believe they could do it. And so I tried my best with them, but I had this other little group, 6, 7, and 8-year-olds, and it was almost like a project of staying positive. And I used to say to their class, we love rolls. And that group, one of them's now a college majorette with me, but they love rolls. So a lot of it is just having a positive thought on it from the very beginning. But and then I put the basic twirls into a little section. There's so many different ones you can do. I keep thinking of more, but ways that we can connect. And then the last part is that a lot of these basic skills are really in the C and the B, and some in the B1 compulsory. So when I have a class and you do these things, and they're really part of the way there towards knowing the compulsories. And so, and I've really found, I teach the compulsories anyway, but right now during the COVID time, it's been really good because USTA's offered the evaluations on Zoom. So I've had several athletes, like we worked and worked and worked on a certain level, and then they passed, and they felt really good about, doing that and having that accomplishment right now while we were kind of in isolation. So I'll stop my share and then I'll go through. Okay, welcome. This is my hallway twirling and dance studio. Okay, so the first thing, I usually stretch them out, but I was going to show you this because right now I teach primary dancers, and we call the Pop-Tarts. So this is one of their favorite things. I pop up and back down, and with the baton. So this is their fun stuff before we start. Pop up behind the head and turn. And with my dancers, I've gotten where I play the happy song. So we dance on Thursday, so they jump up and they do their happy dance for Thursday. So that's some of their fun things. Let me go this back. And then, so when I first start a class, usually one of the very first things I do is have them do the chin. I'm sure just about everybody does this, roll it down and balance it on their hands. And then usually I show them the center, and we practice, finding that center and finding how they can balance it. And then that ends up helping a lot, when you get into figure eights and, all the other different twirls. And then they're usually very excited. Next thing I do, count to 3, 1, 2, 3, and there's lots of things you can do with that when they get it. You can walk on your toes, and whenever everybody usually likes to turn. And these I just sprinkle in among the other things. But the last one that is usually a big hit is hold it up and stick your arm behind your back. And we talk about, I talk about the thumb is forward and you drop it down, and they really feel like they did a super fancy catch when they can catch the bad catch. Okay, so that's the things I sprinkle in among the harder things. Now, when I start working towards the thumb flip, really, I always start with the flat wrist twirl. And when I'm with the twirlers, I have them hold it straight up, and we talk about stirring the pot, like stirring the soup, whatever soup they want, and make it bigger and bigger. And I usually hold on right here till I get them going flat. And then I usually say, okay, can I let go? And it usually takes a while, but we work at it till they get the flat wrist twirl. And then we work it in the other way. A lot of times people I used to like reverse too. So I just say, okay, that's a reverse way. We're gonna go the forward way first. And usually the first toss I teach, I count to 3. And this is good because this ends up coming up in the, I guess it's the A compulsories. 1, 2, 3, they lift up and let go. And that's usually the first release I teach. And that becomes a thing that I usually have people catch 5. That becomes part of their warm-up. 1, 2, 3, toss catch. And then we do it over here, 1, 2, 3, toss catch. So those are things I do first. And then when we get ready to start working towards thumb flip, the series that I found is helpful, work on the wrist twist, usually count to 5. And the more we do it, they tend to get more flexible. And then from there, do 5 where I go to the thumb. And all these really helps. And the one that I have found really important is the go to the thumb, pulling the arm in. And this is really helpful in keeping the baton close enough to you when you go. And I have found reminding them of this one is very helpful. And I'm going to show you the roll series I like to teach. And a lot of times before I ever get to the thumb roll, I've taught them arm roll. Actually, I usually do that on the first day because that's one of those things actually they can do and feel the accomplishment. But when we get down to the thumb roll, we talk about going to the thumb, and then we pretend, I usually tell people to pretend this is a very small arm. So you're going to pretend to do a little tiny arm roll. So first thing I have them do is to turn it over, and then as we work towards the thumb, and then I have them drop it on purpose to make sure it's going over the thumb. And then the next step would be to thumb roll and catch it underneath. And after we've worked, I usually work on that for several weeks. And then the image that works for me that I talk about is turning a doorknob. And so the more you can focus on that, the wrist twist and really snapping it, the better. Because, when I was younger, that was an area I don't think that I focused on enough. And I've had to really work to get that snap. And so if they can learn that right off, that'll really help their accuracy. And do all that in the right and the left. To try to say, we don't like one hand more than the other, and you might even like your left hand better. Okay, so that's how I work towards the thumb flip. And once they've done all of that, I then go ahead and let them try, to go over the thumb and give it a little push and come out. And I tell them I'm going to be the hawk on the thumb, and I get really close and I look at their thumb to make sure it's going over their thumb. And then when I get to rolls, well, like I was telling you, I usually teach the arm roll first, tell them to roll it, just below the elbow. And same thing like the thumb roll, I'll do the arm roll, and then learning how to drop it first really helps you learn how to roll, but I have to drop it on purpose. And we do it on the left also, and drop it. And then where I work towards is the double arm roll. After that, probably the hardest part is getting them to let it fall and then roll over. So I tell them to pretend, wait till the last second till they're just about to drop it, and then stick it in there. Another one that we can learn usually really right off is we learn the arm roll, and then a few weeks later we'll bend the elbow and tell them to pretend they just have a really short arm today, and we roll it over right there. So we start linking those together, and really I just keep talking about how much fun rolls are, and we're going to get to let it, do a couple of turns before you catch it. And I always tell them my very favorite roll is elbow extension, so they get excited about it, and that we're going to get to do an elbow, and then don't catch it, straighten out your hand and it'll roll over. So that one, my class usually really likes elbow extension. But I thought I would show you how I like to link those together. And a lot of these are in those compulsories, and I believe this is in maybe in the B1s, but there's the elbow and the elbow in the back. But when I start linking them together, like this is, usually I do something like the elbow this way, and then 2 arms, and then pass, and you can get it back in this hand, the elbow extension, and then usually teach them the open arm one, then we can go on to something else. So that way, link together a lot of rolls, and they can start to feel like they have a series. Now, I thought of a number of different series. One thing I usually teach right off, and I will hit my ceiling if I do a straight arm circle, but straight arm circle, because I haven't even really done flourish yet, but they can swing the straight arm and bend. And then in the C compulsories, there's those matched hand passes. So I use this one a lot, pass. And then we could do a lot of different things here. I usually teach arm roll and pass, and arm roll and pass. And then you can go thumb roll and turn. And that makes them feel like they had a routine. So swing, pass, and you can go, both ways. And then I did the thumb roll. And then you can keep making that harder. You could do the whole thing. The other version I was thinking about was you could do the whole thing and do thumb roll. So thumb roll and pass, and thumb roll and pass. And you could even try the thumb flip catch. And that was it. Let me make sure. And one thing I did write down that a lot of times I try to do when we're working on one of the more challenging things is to tell them how many more chances would you like to have. So it's not like I said, okay, we're going to do this 10 times. I say, oh, how many more chances would you like? And then they get excited and they say they'd like 3 more. And then I move on to the next thing. And then if they're really close, I say, you're so close, let's just try it. You get 1 more chance. And then they try it again. And oh, I know, one more thing that they can learn a fancy catch, like once you learn the thumb roll, and a lot of times I'll teach them the back catch or super fancy thumb roll, and they can go under the leg. And one thing that I'm sort of the sticker lady. I like to give lots of stickers, and sometimes I have a sticker festival. So if they catch a certain number, they could have, lots of stickers based on what they've accomplished. I think that's everything. So if anybody has any questions.
Jenny, thank you so much. What fun and just joy to watch you as you taught that and shared that with us. Thank you. I don't know about the rest of you. I feel very, very fortunate. We really have some wonderful presenters. Does anybody have any questions for Jenny? Can't see, so just unmute yourself if you do. I don't know if there were any. I think I see lots and lots of compliments in the chat, Jenny. Jackie, no questions though, huh?
Nope, no
Okay.
questions.
All right. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, we have actually officially started the coaches mentoring program, And Jackie's going to tell you a little bit about our initial matches that we've made.
No, this is our interpretation of Match.com. We've started our mentoring program. We have designed it somewhat like the judges mentoring program is. And we are really privileged to have the caliber of coaches that we have that have committed to contributing and helping coaches that had requested some mentoring. So I'm gonna just talk about the people that we've assigned tonight. We try to, we have mentors from every region. And so I noticed tonight, Carrie Lee, is it Schultz? Carrie Lee. Anyway, she's on tonight. I think she's from Maryland. And so we have matched her up with Patty W. I can't say Patty's last name, but Patty is from New Jersey. And her daughter, Catherine Ramirez, twirled competitively. And Patty has been very, very instrumental in that area of the country in keeping coaches engaged, advising them, etc. So we have really, I think we're really fortunate that she has committed to helping us with this program. And so we have matched her up with, is it Carrie Lee, I think. And then in the southern region, we have Lori Perkins in Texas, and she has agreed to mentor Sarah Rudin, who is from Round Rock, Texas. And Elise Gilman lives in Birmingham, Alabama. And we have, and Elise is going to mentor Jill Holcomb, who is from Huntsville. And so we're really excited about that also. And Elise has a lot of experience as a coach, as a judge, and as a competitor. So she's a good background for that. And Brenda Minnick in Indiana has agreed to mentor Madison Ice, Madison is just finishing her competitive career and going into coaching and judging. And so she wanted a little feedback or experience with a mentor. So we have added her with Brenda Minnick. So those are our 4 matches. Thomas, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jackie.
Mm-hmm.
We're really excited to get this going, and really want to emphasize that our orientation is towards the beginning coach, the mentor, the mentee, or the mentoree, whichever word you prefer to use. So whatever sorts of needs or questions or types of things that person might need for resources, we know that our coaches are going to try and provide them, as well as to be good listeners and problem solvers as well. So thanks to you all who are initial mentorees. If any of you are interested in getting a mentor, at the end of every meeting, I put out meeting notes. I attach any videos or handouts that we have from the meeting. And I will also put in the link to apply for a mentor so that you have that. So that will always be available in notes. So let me just stop and see if anybody has any questions for the good of the order, or anything anybody wants to share at this time.
Tom, it looks like Christine Zoll has a question.
Oh, thank you guys. Please just unmute yourself and talk. I cannot see all of you, so just go for it.
Hi, I just have a question. We've been working on compulsories, and I was trying to schedule, hoping to schedule some virtual evaluations, or possibly have a studio essentials meet in our studio, gym. And I was told that I can't do a virtual or a studio meet yet at this time. Is that the case? Or will there be?
Thomas, do you want me to answer that?
I sure do, Cindy.
So you can sanction a studio meet.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you just have to complete the sanction application and read the safety handbook and complete the necessary paperwork. We do not sanction virtual online evaluations. That's a national sponsored evaluation program.
Okay. Will there be any of the virtual national sponsored evaluations coming up?
We don't have any scheduled, and I don't believe we will this season. Now that could change, but right at this point, we do not have any scheduled.
Okay. So at this point, we're kind of, on our own, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
Where are you, Christine?
Maryland.
Okay.
I have some people that can do it virtually. I just have to see if I can get somebody to come in to do it.
Okay.
So, all right. I just wanted to see.
Paige, can I use your name? I don't know.
Come down to Maryland. Is she in New Jersey?
No, she is not.
Oh,
No, I'm not in New Jersey.
I'm just going to say, Christine, that Paige has done some work this year already with some online virtual type things, and that perhaps she would be willing to consult with you, email or whatever, if you had any additional questions.
Okay.
Absolutely. Well, and Christine, just today, I did apply for a USTA sanction for an in-person essentials meet for my studio. So the process was very simple. And if you can secure a USTA judge to come in to do the evaluations.
That's I just need somebody who can come.
Yeah, but I'd be happy to help mentor you filling out any of the paperwork. It was really easy.
Actually, I've done that already. So I've been in contact with Carrie Cook about it. So I'm good with that. I just need to get somebody to come. So
yeah, okay, good luck. Yeah. Good luck.
Good luck indeed.
Thomas, we have a question in the chat.
Uh-huh.
Taryn Palacios is asking if we have any suggestions for mic and camera for teaching through Zoom.
Well, first, Taryn, thank you for the question. Secondly, Corey did write 3 different articles regarding Zoom instruction, and they are posted on Knowledge Central, and you should feel free to avail yourself of those. And lastly, I would say that Amy Bonaduce, the middle presenter today, went through an awful lot getting her home studio set up with camera and sound and everything like that. And so if you have any questions, you'd be welcome to relay them through me, and I'll put you in touch with Amy. Okay.
And just one more thing regarding Knowledge Central. If you've never accessed it before, Monica, you want to speak to that, how they can find Knowledge Central on the USTA website?
Sure. So if you go to ustwirling.com, on the left-hand side of the page, there's a little menu bar, and at the very bottom should be a link for Knowledge Central. And Knowledge Central is an unofficial blog for USTA where we host a plethora of articles and videos that are meant to help add any additional insider information to your professional experience and for twirlers for their competitive experience as well. And that there's also some information for parents. But it's a blog style website that hosts a lot of articles and information, but it is also if you're a professional member, you can also use it to get access to specific professional member resources like compulsory videos, movement technique videos, performance examples, and things like that. And to access that, you can, at the top of the menu bar on Knowledge Central, there is a Let me not guess what the name of the menu is. Give me just a second. Okay. At the menu bar at the top, there is a button for professional resources. And then in the drop down for that menu item, there is a link to an article about how to get that special access for educational materials for USTA professional members. You click on that and it will give you all of the information that you'll need in order to access those professional member resources.
Monica, did you see Christine Zoll's?
So you're going to have to, so for those who are reviewing this online at a later date, Christine asks if I can provide a link to the compulsory movement videos on Knowledge Central. And the answer is I cannot, because it's behind a login. So the best way for you to remember to get access to those materials is to go to the USTA Knowledge Central website, click on professional resources, get the information on how to log in. Right now, the login information is going to be on the USTA members documents page. You'll get the username and password that you'll use to log into that specific site, and then be able to access the compulsories and movement technique videos. It sounds complicated, but it is really not. And I just encourage you to go to Knowledge Central, click on professional resources, and find that information. Just follow the instructions.
And thank you, Monica. And to a certain extent, we're your clearinghouse. So if that doesn't work, if you go to Knowledge Central and you can't get in, then I would hope that you would write me or Jackie or Nikki or Sandy and say, hey, it's not working. And one of us will hopefully pick up the ball and get back to you. Not hopefully, we will pick up the ball and let you know the answer. Okay? So, thanks, everybody. Thanks for being willing to answer that on the spot, Monica, and everything like that. And so we are past our time to close. Here's the closing, everybody. John, thank you very much for being here. And John posted all of the documents on the chat. So anybody who wants to download Creative Challenge docs, they are there for you to download right there, I believe, and utilize them. Go ahead and write a creative grant and get some money for your program. Amy Bonaduce had to go back to her teaching schedule tonight, but I will share her handout as well. And Jenny, Hanna, thank you so much for being here and also for creating your handout. Any one of these presentations could be a class. And so really these are just tastes of things, which brings me back to my last point. Since we started this, we've had, I think, really strong presentations, a strong presentation on branding and taking over a program that was created by someone else with a handout that would be a great guide. A great information session on marketing your program with a schedule included. And if any of you don't have that PowerPoint that Lindsay Pedersen shared back in the September or October meeting, let me know and we will get you that PowerPoint. We've had great presentations on keeping the heart, as well as on keeping twirling going and on keeping it fun and worthwhile to the child as well, their social needs. And we've had what can you do indoors and how can you take care of yourself and your athletes during this COVID time. I say all that because would you please let us know what you want to have presented? Send me an email. I send out an email after every meeting with a summary and all that other stuff. Reply to that email and tell me what you would like to see and what would be helpful to you and your program. Okay? Please and thank you. Thanks everybody for being here.
Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you. See you next March 9th, Tuesday, the second Tuesday of March is our next Coaches Network meeting. And if you want to apply for a mentor, go for it. Thank you, everybody.